My name is Leona Herzog. I am the director and curator of the Buhler Gallery in St. Boniface Hospital. Our current show is titled Dura Mater, Objective, Subjective, and we are talking to artists and scientists about their thoughts behind this work. Today we're going to be looking at a piece by Erika Lincoln, and Erika worked with Dr. Colin Kazina, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. We are fortunate, however, that Dr. Sari Hannila will be stepping in to address the science. Enjoy.
Dr. Kazina's research mostly influenced me by the surgeries that he performs and just discussing how between the surgery, the patient, the surgical team, and all of the equipment that is used, that it's a delicate balance between everybody working together in order to facilitate something. So for me, sound in this piece is sort of central. One of the things that with me is I sometimes don't hear very well or mix up words that I hear. So this piece sort of represents that process of voice, interpretation, and then output, where this is sort of the beginning part, which is all wonderfully held together in a sort of very formal way. The thread moves through the knot, which is a representation of a scan of a brain. It's just an open representation, and then moves through to the output, which is spun around, but isn't necessarily spun around in the best formal and neatest way as they are on this side. So it's a sort of a linear process of how I interpret sound. So there's multiple elements, sound elements within this piece, from microphones in the center of the neural knot, which pick up the vibrations of the thread passing through it, to a scan, a video scan of the knot, which produces low-frequency sound that can then be felt rather than heard. And that's done through this platform where a transducer changes the sound wave into a thump, and it's a low-frequency thump, which anybody can come and participate and engage with the piece sound-wise. The elements, this element is also another way of interpreting sound and working with sound, where if you're not necessarily hearing through your ears, you can hear through your body, and it's accessible as well.
Erika, I love this piece. It's great to see you here today. And you mentioned your work with my colleague, Dr. Colin Kazina, who's a pediatric neurosurgeon. You mentioned the surgeries that he performs and how the patient will often interact with the surgical team while the surgery is going on. That's because the brain doesn't actually feel pain. It is possible for a patient to be awake during brain surgery, and I talked about this with Leona as well in our previous conversation. The patient can hear what's going on, the patient can respond to commands, and as that's happening, the surgeons can pinpoint really important areas to ensure that they're not damaged during the surgery.
Well, one of the things that in looking at visual, how science is represented in graphs or in other kind of representations of either bodies or technologies or data, color is very important. There's always color gradations within that kind of information. And so I wanted to sort of really enhance that color. There's usually the color scale, the RGB color scale. And so I wanted to just sort of play with that idea that it's an interesting visual representation that I don't think is talked about as much in science, is how there's so much color in data or information. My choice of materials for this really works within the sort of technological objects and then also craft objects, in that on the floor you have very many different pieces of electronics that usually have this hard sort of feel to them, and then the neural knot is way more sort of organic in its construction, but everything is integrated and intermixed. So it's not sort of one on one side and one on the other. They're mixed together to sort of form this meshy mess, which is our bodies, I think. So one of the things that I found in my research was a video of a live craniotomy, and the patient was a singer, and the doctor and the surgical team worked together with the patient and asked the patient to sing while the doctor was pinpointing in the brain. And the fascinating thing was, as that person sung and the part of the brain was stimulated, their clear, understood words began to slur and slow. When the doctor removed the stimulus, the voice of the patient and their song was restored to what it was before, and I found that quite fascinating.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned senses here, Erika, because that's exactly where I want to go next. And the great thing about art, the thing that I love about art, is it can be interpreted in so many different ways. And Leona and I had a conversation earlier where I was talking about how this could be a representation of Alzheimer's disease and neurofibrillary tangles, and how information can be distorted because of those diseases. But there's another way to look at this. And so the three spools that you have in front of you, in a way, almost represent the three senses that are present here in this piece, right? We have vision, we have hearing, and we also have touch down here, right?
Yes.
So 3 out of our 5. And those 3 senses, after they are picked up in the periphery by the eyes, by the ears, whatever it may be, that sensory information is relayed through a part of the brain called the thalamus. Okay? The thalamus is found right at the very center of the brain, almost dead center. I love the name of the thalamus because it comes from the Greek word for bedroom or bedchamber. And so the bedchamber that's where we keep all the deepest, darkest secrets. That's the secret part of the house that you never let anyone see when they come over, right? So that's very appropriate. So these sensations are all relayed through the thalamus, and from there they go to the higher parts of the brain, what we call the cerebral cortex, and that's where interpretation occurs. Okay? So in a way, I see these 3 senses as passing through the thalamus. Your neural knot can also be a thalamus, and from there those sensations are transferred to the cortex. This might look distorted, and it certainly can be. But remember, none of these sensations are happening in isolation either. They're all informing each other. This is where context comes into play, where memory comes into play, where experience is formed.
So I find that very interesting that you see that as sort of the cortex, where memory and everything comes together, because I was seeing that part of the piece, as a document that shows the unraveling from this side and the re-raveling to that side as a sort of spontaneous, generative documentation of the piece over time through the months that the piece will be running. And that piece will actually be donated to the gallery as a physical manifestation of the time the piece existed in the gallery.
That's what happens in our brains over our lifetimes, right? It is also a document. Our experiences are written in our brain. Synapses form. Connections are broken as well. And so over time, we each develop our own unique footprint. We see it right down at the cellular level.
There's so much to talk about. This was extremely interesting, and I'd like to thank artist Erika Lincoln for her work, and I'd also like to thank Dr. Sari Hannila for her wonderful insights into this. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you back in the Buhler Gallery at St. Boniface Hospital very soon.